Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XT Gale of Darkness video, where today I'm going to be completing the game using Chobin's team. Now, the thing about Chobin is that he is the first trainer that you fight in the game, and so he obviously starts out very weak. In fact, he only starts with one Pokemon, that being a Sunkern, a Pokemon that is well known for having the lowest base stat total of any Pokemon in the game. And our Sunkern has a hasty nature, raising its speed but lowering its defense, which, considering it only has 30 base speed, is actually kind of decent. It gets the Chlorophyll ability, which doubles its speed in Sun, but that's not going to come up for quite a while, and Chobin has decided it only has Absorb. So with that, we get straight into the challenge, and unlike most challenge videos, I'm actually going to start with the Sunkern because I think it's much more funny if I actually do the battle Sunkern versus Sunkern, but this takes a very long time. So I guess since we're sitting here for quite a while, this should be the very last video of 2025, and even though I did say thank you in the previous video released on Christmas, I just want to reiterate once again, thank you for a fantastic year, and just recently we hit 500 subscribers, which is honestly incredible, and I'd like to just thank every single person who, subscribed or not, continues to watch these videos and enjoys my content. Now, I do think that 2025 was a pretty good year, but there were definitely some video droughts from just me not getting stuff out, and I never really recovered from summer, but I do think that the overall quality of the videos are a bit better. Oh, we're just about to finish Chobin. I'll come back to this in just a bit because I assume there's going to be more battles like this. Anyway, we go back now with our sister in tow, and we can actually fight Chobin a second time and gain our second Pokemon, which is a Magikarp. And unlike the first battle against Chobin, I actually do have a Teddiursa on my side now, so Sunkern shouldn't be getting hit nearly as often, and so eventually I take down the Sunkern, and then all that's left is the Magikarp, which also eventually goes down, and I'm able to beat it, and I add a Magikarp to my team. It has a mild nature, raising its special attack but lowering its defense, and definitely not a great nature for Magikarp, but it should be alright. It gets the Swift Swim ability, doubling its speed and rain, and it gets the move Splash, as chosen by Chobin. But he also has gifted us the move Growth, which is definitely going to help out quite a lot because we could do almost no damage to most things up to this point. Now, of course, before I can really move on with the challenge, I need to first exhaust Magikarp of all of its splashes, that way it can use the move Struggle and actually contribute to fights. And usually this trainer here in Getty Port is the best for it, because once you take down the Whismur, Meryl really likes to go for Defense Curl instead of attacking, and so you can waste a lot of PP here. Unfortunately, even though I do get pretty far, it's not quite enough to get Magikarp down to 0, so I decide to play it safe and go ahead and take down the Meryl a little bit early. But I do think that it was definitely a decent start, and you know what, I'm feeling a bit bold. I decided to go ahead and fight the old lady in a gate village, and surprisingly, I'm able to actually take her down, now that Magikarp can use Struggle. So with that, we, after a very long time, finally move on to the battle against the old man. I go for Struggle with Magikarp, and luckily it hits Abra, doing quite a bit of damage to it. I go for Growth with Sunkern, but not before it gets hit by a Fire Punch and also Water Gun. Go for another Struggle, this time it hits Horsey, and Sunkern goes down. Unfortunately, this leads to a very quick loss, so I go back into the battle once again. I go for Struggle, and luckily it hits Abra again, and Magikarp goes down to a Thunder Punch. Now the thing is while that is a bit unfortunate that Magikarp went down, it's not our main damage dealer, unlike Sunkern, so there is still a chance at victory. So I continue with the battle, I take down Abra, and then out comes Shroomish, and once the Shroomish is by itself, after Horsey goes down, this is going to be a very similar fight to when I was fighting Sunkern. So I guess I'll go ahead and continue my ramblings. I guess if you are enjoying this video, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now, for 2026, I really want to get back up to 2 videos a week. Whether or not that ends up happening really just depends on me, but that is the goal that I have in mind. Anyway, we're just about to finish the battle against the old man, and one last Absorb does it, and we move on to the Power Rangers, where today I decide to fight Blue because I can do super effective damage to him with Absorb. So while I am still likely to lose, it's probably the best trainer to fight against. Anyway, I think that's enough channel stuff. Let's go ahead and move on to the run in particular. Now, Chobin is a very funny trainer because he has an adoration for Dr. Kaminko's frankly impractical inventions, like shoes that always have something in the bottom of the sole to annoy you, or the Robo Groudon that we'll see later in the video that's basically just a Groudon body with a cockpit for the trainer, which I guess would give you a bit of a confidence boost, but I think the strangest thing about Chobin is the fact that he doesn't have a Gulpin for one, especially considering his face, and two, his Pokemon choices are kind of odd, which I think fits the character, and while we're not quite there yet, his other remaining Pokemon, while they look to work together, they really don't, which I think is just very fun. Anyway, now at level 26, Sunkern can finally evolve into Sunflora. Now here's the thing, I could have also stayed a Sunkern with Absorb, Mega Drain, Ingrain, and Growth, but the thing is this has been 3 hours of constant grinding, and I just really want to be a Sunflora now. So it has Ingrain, Razor Leaf, Sunny Day, and Pound. And so after a very tedious grind, we finally move on to the first boss of the game, Lavrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I send out my Sunflora and Magikarp. But because I decided to heal before the fight, Magikarp is forced to use Splash, so it's not really going to be doing much here. I set up Sunny Day on the first turn, that way Sunflora can actually outspeed her Pokemon, because even though it's evolved, it still only has 30 base speed. I go for Pound into the Beautifly, not really doing that much damage to it. I go for another one, taking it down to yellow, and Water Gun finishes off Magikarp. Ghost hits Sunflora, dealing quite a bit of damage. I go for another Pound to finish off the Beautifly, and then she sends out her Roselia. And unfortunately, I still have to use Pound at this point to deal damage to it. Luckily, it is doing over half, and Roselia can't really do too much to me. Okay, never mind, Pin Missile is doing much more damage than I expected. I go for Pound, taking down Roselia, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, a Shadow Delcatty. Now, unfortunately, because the sun isn't active anymore, I won't be able to outspeed it, so I get taken down with the Shadow Rush. However, there is a very simple solution, and that's doing a bit of extra training to get Magikarp to evolve into Gyarados at level 26 as well. Now, Chobin has actually done a pretty decent job here, giving Gyarados both Thrash and Bite, and Thrash is a fairly strong physical move, and Bite has that chance to flinch. And, of course, becoming Gyarados gives me the Intimidate ability, so I go back into the battle once again, now with Gyarados in tow, and I go for Pound and Thrash, which I take down the Love Disc in a single hit, then out comes Roselia, and now with the extra levels, Beautifly is actually taken down to half health by Pound instead of a third, and Roselia goes down to a single Thrash. Delcatty comes out, and I think I was just being safe with Pound, making sure Roselia went down, because Razor Leaf would have been the better pick here, unless I was taking down the Beautifly. One last Thrash takes down Beautifly, and then Delcatty goes down to Razor Leaf. Now, of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B. How's it going, Mirror B? Well, actually, we'll see in the new year. Moving on to Snattle, and right away I go for Bite into Lantern, dealing almost no damage, and Razor Leaf almost takes it down. Quagsire is 4 times weak to it, so it goes down in a single hit, then out comes Lunestone. Unfortunately, Lantern hits a 4 times effective Shockwave into Gyarados in return. Go for Bite into Lunatone, dealing a little bit of damage, though I do get a lucky flinch. Lantern goes down, and Lunatone goes down to Razor Leaf, and then he sends out Cast Form and his final Pokemon, Metang. I go for Razor Leaf and Bite, hoping for a flinch on Cast Form, and Razor Leaf takes Cast Form down to yellow and gets a crit on Metang, dealing quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, Metang does finish off Gyarados with a crit Thunder Punch, and Sunflora gets hit by Weather Ball, not really doing that much damage. A critical hit Metal Claw, though, does take it below half. Cast Form goes down to a Razor Leaf, and Metang is down to yellow. And go for another one, taking it down to red. Metal Claw hits once again, and luckily I'm able to get past this battle on the first attempt. So now moving on to, once again, Chobin. And in this battle, had I not evolved into Sunflora immediately, I would have been using this Sunkern. And then I would have evolved it after I finished this battle, but I really just didn't want to deal with Sunkern anymore, so we get past this one with relative ease, and then we go back in for the rematch against Chobin in his new Robo Groudon. And this battle might actually be kind of difficult. He leaves with the exact same lead as before, Sunflora and Gyarados. However, in this battle he actually has another 2 Pokemon, and while they are going to be very helpful throughout the rest of the game, they actually might be quite a threat here because unfortunately Sunflower doesn't really do much damage against them, and so I will be heavily relying on Gyarados. And that's also the reason why I didn't decide to use Thrash right off the bat. It's because I don't want to be hitting myself in confusion when his first Pokemon comes out. Hoppip. Hello, Hoppip. Goodbye, Hoppip. Okay, Hoppip is definitely a threat, though it's not able to be seen in this battle. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Tropius. And then that's kinda it. I don't get access to any more Pokemon throughout the rest of the game, only one more moveset change, and then that's it. So, after I've defeated Tropius, we can move on and go ahead and see our 2 new Pokemon. Starting with Hoppip, who has a naive nature, raising its speed but lowering its special defense. Now the speed boost could actually be kinda nice, because unfortunately, Hoppip's best use is actually fainting. It gets the Chlorophyll ability, which doubles the speed in Sunshine, and the reason it's so good at fainting is because it gets the move Leech Seed, which is the only actually damaging move that it gets, and when you use Leech Seed and faint, it passes the Leech Seed on to the next Pokemon in line. With that being said, however, it does also get Cotton Spore, which lowers the Pokemon's speed by 2 stages, and it gets Sleep Powder and Stun Spore, which are both good status effect moves, so it really is just planning to get in there, set up something, and fate. And yet, despite this, Hoppip might actually be Chobin's best Pokemon because of this. Anyway, moving on to the Bashful Tropius, which is unfortunately a neutral nature, though I think that's honestly fine. It also gets the Chlorophyll ability, doubling speed in the sun, and it gets Razor Leaf, Sweet Scent, Stomp, and Growth, which is an okay moveset. Now moving on to Gonzap, he leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and unfortunately I'm going into this battle very injured. Gyarados goes down to a Fake Out, and Electrode uses Sonic Boom into Sunflora, only dealing a flat 20 damage. I go for Razor Leaf, dealing a decent amount back to both. Hoppip nearly goes down to a single Spark, though it is very nice to know that it doesn't go down immediately. I go for Cotton Spore to lower Electrode's speed, that way it can't hurt me on the following turn. And I finish it off with a Razor Leaf, and I go for another Cotton Spore into the incoming Vileplume, which I don't think Vileplume was going to be that much of an issue, but guaranteeing that it's going to be slower than everything is very nice. Go for another Razor Leaf, finally finishing off the Nuzleaf, and then he sends out a Whiscash, and it is 4 times weak to Grass, so it's definitely not a threat. Hoppip goes down to a Giga Drain, I send out my Tropius, and at this point I need to prepare for his final Pokemon. I set up an Ingrain with Sunflora, hoping to start healing a bit more, because I also have the Leftovers, which is going to heal quite a bit of health back every turn. Go for Razor Leaf because Tropius did such little damage despite the 4 times weakness. And then out comes this final Pokemon, a Skarmory. Now it unfortunately is 4 times resistant to Grass. The Vileplume is too, but it doesn't have any super effective moves to use against me. Unlike the Skarmory uses Aerial Ace, taking Tropius down from half health, and now all that's left is my Sunflora. And the best thing I can do is use Razor Leaf, and a single Aerial Ace takes me down to half health. I get put to sleep, I call to wake myself up, and Skarmory for some reason just decides to go for Swift. I think it's just playing with me at this point. So I go for Pound, dealing almost nothing to Vileplume. It hits another Aerial Ace, taking me down to 17. I get put back to sleep once again, and Skarmory decides to take me down. So I go back into the battle once again, though this time I decide to do a different lead with Hoppip because I know it doesn't go down to a single Spark. I can go for Cotton Spore to lower its speed. I could have also gone for Stun Spore to quarter its speed instead, but the thing is that Stun Spore isn't nearly as accurate, and neither is Sleep Powder, that misses. And Sunflora actually gets taken down pretty low, though I do have Ingrain and Leftover set up, so it does heal quite a bit of health back. I go for Sleep Powder, which does actually hit this time, and I decide to go for Leech Seed with Hoppip into the Electrode, though Hoppip really doesn't do too much here anymore. The extra damage is nice, and a little bit of healing in case I do get hit, it could be okay. But anyway, now that Electrode is getting fairly low, I decide to swap over to Gyarados, and I go for one last Razor Leaf to take down the Electrode, and nearly take down the Nuzleaf, though it is stuck recharging this turn, so it's not actually a threat. Go for Thrash, hoping to hit the Vileplume, but unfortunately it decides to hit Nuzleaf. Then out comes Whiscash. Razor Leaf takes the Whiscash down in a single hit, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, Skarmory. And this is where the plan comes into play. Vileplume gets taken down to yellow, and Skarmory hits an Aerial Ace, taking Sunflora down to half. Unfortunately, Gyarados is now confused, and I decide to swap into Hoppip, which is a bit dangerous, but if my plan ends up working, this should speed up the fight quite a bit. Unfortunately, Hoppip gets taken down right away. I send out Gyarados, though doing this did get rid of the confusion, which is nice. It can attack again. I go for Bite into Vileplume, so that I can actually guarantee I hit it, and then all that's left is the Skarmory. So I go for another Bite, because its special defense is much lower than its physical defense. But then I also thought about the fact that Gyarados has a much higher attack stat than a special attack stat, so I decided to swap over to Thrash, which I think might actually be doing more damage. But either way, eventually Gonzap goes down, and we can now evolve our Hoppip at level 37. And when it evolves into Skiploom, it gets access to a few new moves: Mega Drain, Cotton Spore, Leech Seed, and Sleep Powder, so it can actually attack now. I pick up the Tangela here for the Miracle Seed item to raise Grass-type damage by 10%, and then I go into the battle against Gorgon. He leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and I go for Sunny Day and Growth right away. That way I can raise the damage that Tropius does, because right now it does almost nothing. Though, unfortunately, Tropius goes down on the very first turn, and that's because I forgot to account for the fact that because it's part flying, Lairon's not actually going to be using Protect. Now, unfortunately, Skiploom once again finds itself in a bit of a weird spot, not really being able to do much here. And so I decided to just set up Leech Seed on Lairon to get a little bit of health back, but also at the same time I know Razor Leaf is just going to take it down on the following turn anyway. I put it to sleep, maybe it misses, it doesn't, and so they both go down. He then sends out Slowking and Ursaring, and now Skiploom has a bit more of a use here. I set up Leech Seed on Ursaring. That way, if Skiploom does go down, it goes on to the next Pokemon. And luckily, Skiploom actually does go down this turn, so I can pass it on to Gyarados, which should be strong enough to take down the rest of his Pokemon. I go for Bite into Slowking and another Razor Leaf, which Razor Leaf takes it down to red, and Ursaring also gets taken down to red with a crit Razor Leaf. Slowking goes down, sending out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape, and then Ursaring goes down to the Leech Seed. So he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Hypno. And I think I'm in a pretty decent spot here. I go for Thrash, which takes Primeape below half, and Hypno hits the Shadow Storm, taking Gyarados to half, and gets a crit on Sunflora, dealing quite a bit to it as well. Razor Leaf doesn't quite take down the Primeape, but luckily Thrash hits it, taking it down, and then all that's left is the Hypno. And its Shadow Storms do quite a bit of damage, though now that it's all by itself, as long as Gyarados hits, I'm able to finish it off and beat Gorgon on the first attempt. Now, of course, before I can go to Cinder Dark Isle, there is still one more fight to do against Chobin, and unfortunately this is the battle that turns this run from good to terrible. And it's mostly because Chobin truly believes that Gyarados is a dragon type, and while that is beautiful, unfortunately the two dragon moves he has given it are Dragon Rage, a move that does a set 40 damage, and Twister, which Twister actually could be fine because it does have a chance to flinch, but it is incredibly weak. So unfortunately, I won't have access to a decent physical attacking move anymore. And just as bad, Sunflora gets the move Petal Dance. Now Petal Dance is a fairly strong grass type move. Unfortunately, it's like Thrash in that if you use it 2 or 3 times, you get confused, and it locks you into the move until you either hit yourself or you've used up those 2 or 3 turns and get confused. So Sunflora and Gyarados get extremely nerfed. However, there is one Pokemon that does get a big buff, and that is Tropius, in that it gets Body Slam, and also Magical Leaf, but I think Body Slam is surprisingly going to be the more useful move, and that's because, at this point, Tropius is basically the only Pokemon that can deal with the final boss's 3 birds. And that is a little worrying, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And I guess I should also mention the other thing that's been plaguing this run for quite a while now, and that's that Sunflora is the Sunsetter. Unfortunately, it's also the slowest thing on the team, which isn't great, but anyway. Now Sunflora has Petal Dance, Sunny Day, Bullet Seed, and Ingrain. So I lost Pound, which was the only move Sunflora had to deal with anything that resisted the grass type, and I got Petal Dance, which is definitely worse than Razor Leaf. Gyarados gets Twister, Dragon Rage, Leer, and Bite. At least Bite's still there, but honestly Twister does the same thing and is a spread move, so I think Twister's better. Skiploom was luckily unaffected by this, and Tropius gets Body Slam, Magical Leaf, Whirlwind, and Sweet Scent, so unfortunately it did lose Growth, allowing it to actually raise its Grass-type damage. But Body Slam and Magical Leaf are good moves, I guess. Anyway, now moving on to the final area of the game, and honestly this is not looking very good, but we'll just have to see how well they do. So, starting off with Lavrina, she leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis. I go for Petal Dance and Magical Leaf, and while I do get quite a bit of damage on Gorbis, it takes down Tropius, and Sunflora gets frozen by Gardevoir. So I send out Gyarados, who is able to outspeed and take down Gorbis with a Dragon Rage. Then she sends out her Roselia, and I think in hindsight, maybe I should have gone for Twister this turn to hope for a flinch. But I don't think it would have mattered all that much. Sunflora gets taken down before it even has a chance to thaw, and then I send out my final Pokemon, Skiploom. Now Gardevoir does have Ice Punch and Thunder Punch, so both of my Pokemon are in a pretty bad spot right now. So I go for Mega Drain and Bite, though it's not enough. Gyarados gets taken down very low and gets hit by Leech Seed as well. I go for another Mega Drain, taking Gardevoir down to half, and Bite takes it down to low red. Ice Punch takes down Skiploom, and Gyarados goes down to Leech Seed. So, an unfortunate first attempt, but we go back in once again, and this time I decide to lead with Sunflora and Gyarados, and I go for Twister right away, hoping for a flinch, though unfortunately I don't get it on Gardevoir, so it's able to hit a Thunder Punch, and unfortunately it paralyzes Gyarados right away. I'm able to take down the Gorbis though, and then out comes the Roselia. I get taken down by another Thunder Punch, and I go for another Petal Dance, which hits Gardevoir, taking it down to half. And just to be safe, I decide to go for Sleep Powder, which luckily does hit and puts Gardevoir to sleep, and so it's not able to attack. Petal Dance takes it down with a crit, though it definitely was not necessary, and then out comes Farfetch'd, her first Shadow Pokemon. Now, I do want to try to put Farfetch'd to sleep just so it can't get up to its usual shenanigans of confusing or setting up Shadow Sky, and luckily I'm able to do so, and I set up Sunny Day. And now I decide to swap Sunflora out for Tropius, that way I can actually start dealing with the Farfetch'd and the Pokemon coming after. And I go ahead and go for Leech Seed into it as well, just so I can get a bit of health, and also do a bit more chip damage to it. So I go for Body Slam and Mega Drain, which Mega Drain of course isn't doing that much damage, and Body Slam is doing a decent amount. Roselia really doesn't do that much with Pin Missile, and so I slowly take down the Farfetch'd. And then out comes her final Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria. And once again, I'm going to try to set up Leech Seed right away, and also try to put it to sleep. And then at that point, all it is a battle of attrition, which I'm hoping to win. Go for Body Slam, and I get a lucky paralysis. Unfortunately, that means that I can't put it to sleep though. Skiploom gets taken down by Pin Missile, and then I send out Sunflora once again. And even though Sunflora can't really do much damage to Altaria, it just being alive is going to help by allowing the Leech Seed damage to build up. And unfortunately, while I do think that I will win this fight, it is going to take quite a while. I go for another Body Slam, and I set up Ingrain, just to guarantee my safety. Pin Missile does quite a bit to Sunflora though, with a crit. Leech Seed is able to take down Altaria, and then all that's left is the Roselia, which Body Slam and Petal Dance should be able to slowly take it down. Actually, Body Slam did quite a bit to it. So eventually I do finish it off, and we beat Lavrina on the second attempt. But it did take quite a while. Anyway, with that, we move on to the top of the volcano, where we run into Snattle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Matang, and I decide to lead with Sunflora and Skiploom. That way I can set up the Sun and set up Leech Seed on Matang. That way it can slowly get taken down because I don't really have super effective damage to use against it. So Body Slam hits Skiploom, doing half, and unfortunately it gets paralysis right away, though I am able to heal some of that damage back. I go for Petal Dance, and then I go for Sleep Powder to put Matang to sleep. Quagsire goes down to Petal Dance, and then he sends out Scizor. Now Scizor is a huge threat, and unfortunately Skiploom goes down this turn. I would have liked to have put Scizor to sleep as well, or just gotten Leech Seed off on it. I send out Gyarados, and that's so I can at least deal kinda decent damage to Scizor, but even with Petal Dance and Dragon Rage working together, it only takes it down to half. So unfortunately I just don't really have a good way of dealing with it. I decide to swap out over to Tropius because now Sunflora is confused. Go for another Dragon Rage, taking it down to low red. It hits the Silver Wind, not really doing too much to Tropius. Thunder Punch from Matang does quite a bit to Gyarados though. and I go for Body Slam to finish off Scizor, and I go for Dragon Rage just in case it's not able to KO. It does, and then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Solrock, and Dragon Rage does a decent amount of damage to it. I think in hindsight though, Bite might have been the better choice because it is super effective, but it shouldn't really matter because Magical Leaf should take it down. I go for Dragon Rage into Metang, and unfortunately it hangs on by just a sliver. Solrock goes down to Magical Leaf, and then out comes Cast Form. Ice Punch hits Tropius, taking it down to 18, and the Fruity Pebbles come down, taking it down to 8 HP. Metang goes down to the Fruity Pebbles, so Gyarados doesn't actually get any extra healing, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Starmie. Now, unfortunately, Starmie actually takes down Tropius before it can use Magical Leaf, and so I send out Sunflora, who takes a very strong Flamethrower, taking it down to half health. And now I need just a little bit of luck. Sunflora needs to be able to hit Starmie with a Petal Dance, though unfortunately it doesn't even get the chance. It goes down. I am able to hit Starmie with one last bite before Cast Form hits a Thunderbolt, taking down Gyarados. So I go into the battle now for the third attempt, and I send out Tropius and Skiploom, and I'm able to put Metang to sleep right away and take down the Quagsire with a Magical Leaf. He then sends out Scizor, and because Skiploom hasn't been KO'd yet, there is a chance that I can put Scizor to sleep as well. I decide to swap into Gyarados, that way I can actually deal some decent damage to Scizor. And unfortunately, Metang wakes up on the first turn, hitting an Ice Punch, nearly taking Skiploom down in a single hit. I decide to go for Leech Seed into it though, because Skiploom is already done its job very well, and if it goes down, I'd like for it to carry on the Leech Seed to the next Pokemon, but Metang actually decides to attack Gyarados instead, leaving Skiploom alive, and so I go for a Sleep Powder, which actually hits and puts Metang to sleep. Okay, well that is quite nice. I go for a Dragon Rage to finish off the Scizor, and then I decide to swap into Sunflora, because I do need a Grass-type move to actually take down the Shadow Solrock. Now, even though it is a little bit risky because I might not end up hitting Solrock, I do think that this is the better choice because I can set up Sunny Day this turn, guaranteeing that any of my Chlorophyll Pokemon afterwards are going to be able to outspeed the rest of his team. I go for Dragon Rage to take Metang down a bit lower, and Sunny Day is now up. Metang wakes up, hits a Thunder Punch, taking Gyarados down to 32 HP. I decide to swap into Tropius now, and then I go for Petal Dance, which unfortunately hits Metang, and he sends out his Cast Form. Now unfortunately this does mean that Solrock is going to be able to set up Shadow Sky, but on the other hand, Cast Form isn't going to be a Fire type anymore, so maybe this will end up working out better. I go for Magical Leaf into Solrock, and it is doing quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, it's not quite a one-shot. Flamethrower doesn't do that much to Tropius, and Sunflora gets a critical hit with Petal Dance, taking down Cast Form in a single hit. He sends out the Shadow Starmie once again, and to my dismay, Sunflora is actually confused this turn, so there is a 50% chance it won't be able to act this turn, and instead just hit itself. But Sunflora might have actually just been ahead of the curve, because it has pre-confused itself before Solrock can use Shadow Panic to confuse my Pokemon. So maybe Sunflora is actually a genius? I don't know. Magical Leaf, Starmie takes Sunflora down to 28, and Magical Leaf hits, taking it down to low yellow, and Petal Dance finishes off. So I go into the battle against Ardos now. He leads with an Alakazam and Shadow Swallow, and I decide to lead with Sunflora and Skiploom, and I go for Sleep Powder on Alakazam right away because it does have Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Thunder Punch, but unfortunately Skiploom goes down to a single Shadow Break, and so I bring out Tropius, and Sunflora gets taken down to half HP by a single Ice Punch. But now that the sun is up, Tropius can actually outspeed both of his Pokemon and does half damage to Alakazam with Body Slam, but unfortunately Sunflora does not outspeed either of them. And it goes down to Swallow. I send out Gyarados, who is able to take a Fire Punch very well, go for Body Slam to finish off the Alakazam, and then he sends out Kingdra. And Swallow decides to go for Shadow Half, which might actually work in my favor because it's not going to attack this next turn. Dragon Rage takes it down to low red, and then I can focus my attention on Kingdra. Body Slam does about a quarter, and Dragon Rage finishes it off. So he sends out his next Pokemon, a Heracross, and it has both Rock Tomb and Mega Horn, which does threaten to do a lot of damage. I go for Body Slam into it. Swallow sets up Shadow Sky, but I'm able to take it down with a crit Twister. And then next comes his Shadow Electabuzz. And the only reason I'm really going for Twister here is I'm hoping for a flinch, though unfortunately I don't get it, and Tropius gets hit by Mega Horn, dealing a lot of damage, and Electabuzz finishes it off, just leaving my Gyarados left, which can't really do much on its own before going down. So, after losing a couple more times, I decided to go to Mount Battle to do a bit of training. And when I say a bit of training, I mean a lot of training. Because even after doing a lot of this training, I'm still not able to beat Ardos for quite a few attempts until I finally get to attempt number 9, where I lead with Sunflora and Tropius, but right away I'm going to swap Tropius into Gyarados, and the reason being is that Alakazam generally likes to attack the Tropius. And so when I swap into Gyarados, it's able to take the Ice Punch a lot better than Tropius can, and when it decides to go for Thunder Punch into Gyarados, I can then swap into Skiploom, which takes the Thunder Punch decently well. It's more or less just an in-between for now, because I'm going to do the exact same thing again. Now, what is Sunflora doing in the meantime? Well, I'm using Ingrain, that way I can get a little bit of health back, and I'm trying to set up Sunny Day, that way Tropius can outspeed and take it down with Body Slam. Now, I decided not to swap out Gyarados because there is a chance that Bullet Seed does take down Alakazam as long as it hits 4 times. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen on this attempt. I send out Tropius after Gyarados faints, and I go for Body Slam to take down Swellow because it's going to try to set up Shadow Sky again, and then he sends out Kingdra, and I finish off the Alakazam with Bullet Seed, which then brings out the Heracross. Now, what was the point of all that setup? Well, the thing is I really need the Sun to be set up, that way Tropius can outspeed things, and I need Gyarados to use the Intimidate ability that it has in order to lower Swellow's attack stat, that way it will prefer to use Shadow Half, that way I can guarantee that I take down Alakazam with either a Body Slam, or I can go for the luckier strategy of going for Bullet Seed, which unfortunately didn't work. And speaking of not working, I decided to have Skiploom swap into Gyarados, and that's because Gyarados has a better chance of Swellow actually going for Shadow Half, because once again it has its attack lowered and Gyarados has a much higher HP stat, though unfortunately it was just going to use Shadow Half into Skiploom, which would have been preferable, but oh well. Gyarados went down, which allowed Tropius to come out, which might have been a better position to be in anyway. But returning to the battle at hand, we have Electabuzz and Snorlax on the field, his final Pokemon, and Electabuzz and Snorlax are both asleep, which is very nice. Electabuzz wakes up, uses Shadow Half, which is probably the best thing it could have done, because it will speed up the fight quite a bit, because my Pokemon don't really do that much damage. Mega Drain's not doing much, and Leech Seed is helping a bit. Go for Body Slam, which takes it down to low red. Mega Drain finishes off, and we beat Ardos with the Leech Seed. Anyway, moving on. We move on to Gorgon, who leads with an Ursaring and Slowking, and I go for Petal Dance and Magical Leaf right away. Magical Leaf takes Slowking down to low yellow, and I get a crit Petal Dance taking Ursaring down in a single hit. Then out comes Aggron. Slowking hits an Ice Beam, luckily not into Tropius, and I go for another Magical Leaf to finish it off, sending out his next Pokemon, Walrein. Petal Dance hits Aggron, nearly taking it down in a single hit. It hits an Iron Tail in return, not doing that much to Tropius, but it does lower its defense. Magical Leaf nearly takes down Walrein in a single hit, and Petal Dance finishes off Aggron. He then sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, that being a Shadow Poliwrath. Walrein goes for Ice Beam, taking Sunflora down below half health, and unfortunately Sunflora is now confused. I go for Magical Leaf to finish off the Walrein, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Mr. Mime. Now, because Poliwrath is going to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn, and Sunflora is going to hit itself, I might take quite a bit of damage from Mr. Mime now. Shadow Storm comes out, taking Sunflora down, and it's actually not doing that much damage to Tropius. I decide to send out Gyarados, because it does have Bite to do super effective damage against Mr. Mime. But it looks like I might not even need him, because Tropius is doing over half to Mr. Mime. So I decide to have Gyarados go for Dragon Rage into Poliwrath, and Body Slam finishes off the Mr. Mime. And while Poliwrath is a decent special attacker, it's definitely not nearly as good as Mr. Mime is. Go for another Dragon Rage, taking Poliwrath down to half. Magic Leaf finishes off, and we beat Gorgon on the first attempt. Now moving on to Eldest, he leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go ahead and lead with Sunflora and Tropius. I go for Whirlwind, and this is because I think maybe I can be in a better position if I get rid of Manectric now, and I actually bring out Lapras, which could be pretty good. I decided to set up Ingrain, and Sunflora goes down unfortunately. I send out Gyarados, and I go for Magical Leaf into the Lapras, doing quite a bit of damage, taking it to yellow. It's able to set up Shadow Sky though, and unfortunately because Sunflower went down, I don't actually have a way to change the weather. I go for Body Slam and Dragon Rage, but Dragon Rage actually doesn't deal nearly as much damage as I expected to Lapras, and Body Slam is forced to finish it off. He then sends out his Manectric once again, and I'm really hoping that Gyarados can actually outspeed the Manectric, though unfortunately it doesn't, so Twister isn't able to get a flinch. But Tropius does finish it off with Magical Leaf, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Salamence. And I really don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to be a little funny here and go for Dragon Rage and Whirlwind just to get rid of it. And it hits a Shadow Rush, taking Gyarados down to 7. Dragon Rage really doesn't do that much, and I get rid of it for Flygon. Now Flygon might actually be doable, but Gyarados goes down, and I bring out Skiploom. And I go for a Mega Drain into it and Magical Leaf, hoping to take it down this turn. But it outspeeds both of us, hits a Flamethrower, doing quite a bit. I'm able to take it down to half health, and Mega Drain takes it down to about a third. And I'm thinking that if I can get a bit lucky here, I can put the next Pokemon in line to sleep and finish off the Flygon. But unfortunately, it hits a crit Flamethrower, taking Skiploom down in a single hit. So while I am able to finish off the Flygon, he sends out Salamence once again, and unfortunately there's not really much I can do against it before it takes me down. So I go into the battle once again, now on the 4th attempt, and I lead with Sunflower and Gyarados. I set up Sunny Day on the first turn, and I deal a little bit of damage to Manectric. And now that the sun is set, I can outspeed the Manectric to hopefully take it down in a single hit. Though, of course, Petal Dance is a 50-50 chance. I take it down, and also Petal Dance is a physical move, so I could have gotten hit by Static as well. Anyway, Manectric goes down, and then he sends out Shadow Salamence. I go for Dragon Rage into it, dealing a little bit of damage, and then I go for another Petal Dance, though unfortunately this one hits Ninjask, and another Dragon Rage hits Salamence, taking it down to half. Sunflower goes down, so I swap it to Tropius, and because it's the only thing that can actually deal damage to it. Body Slam takes it down another quarter, and Dragon Rage is able to finish it off. Then he sends out Flygon. Now, before Flygon actually outsped Tropius, but because the sunlight is up, I can now outspeed it and go for Magical Leaf, dealing over half to Flygon, and I go for a Twister, hoping for a flinch, though unfortunately Flygon doesn't get it. The sunlight ends, so I am now hoping that Gyarados can actually hit Twister, which it does, taking Flygon down, and then he sends out his next Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Marowak, and I go for Magical Leaf into it, taking it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, that Shadow Lapras once again. I go for Bite into it and Magical Leaf because I want to deal as much damage as I can to it, as well as getting a possible flinch, which I do get, and then I'm able to take down the Lapras this turn with a Bite and a Body Slam, and then all that's left is Ninjask, which of course can't take both of us on. I go for a Dragon Rage and a Body Slam, which Dragon Rage takes it down to yellow, and Body Slam finishes it off. So with that, we now move on to the big box legendary, Shadow Lugia. I lead with Skiploom and Sunflora, and I set up Sunny Day right away, that way I can outspeed just in case Skiploom misses, though luckily it doesn't, but I will need to hope that it continues to stay asleep. Go for Petal Dance, and I decide to swap into Tropius now. That way I can actually deal a decent amount of damage to it, because Petal Dance does almost nothing. Go for Body Slam, which also is doing almost nothing. Okay, that's definitely a bit concerning. So this is going to take quite a few turns. Body Slam takes it down to half, Petal Dance does just a little more, and I'm glad that Lugia is deciding to stay asleep because I decided to go ahead and swap over to Gyarados so I can speed this up a little quicker. And it stays asleep, which is very nice. So I can finish it off this turn, but not before it hits a crit Shadow Blast, which is honestly quite fair. Anyway, now moving on to the battle against the final boss, he leads with a Shadow Rhydon and Moltres, and I go for Bullet Seed into Rhydon to see how much it'll do, because I don't want to lock Sunflora into having to use Petal Dance at this point. Rhydon hits the Shadow in, taking Skiploom down in a single hit with a crit though, so I'm not sure if it would have been a one-shot, though it likely would have been. I go for Sunny Day and Magical Leaf to finish off the Rhydon, and then out comes Executor, which I don't think anyone on my team other than Gyarados can really do anything against it. I guess Body Slam is okay. Shadow Wind takes down Sunflora, and so I send out Gyarados, who is at extremely low health because of the crit Shadow Blast. And another Body Slam takes Executor down to low red. It hits another Shadow Wind, taking down Gyarados, and Moltres hits a Shadow Fire, not really doing that much damage to Tropius. or at least less than I expected. Executor goes down, and he sends out Tauros, which unfortunately hits me with Intimidate, so my attack is lowered. And so I go for Magical Leaf, which does over half to Tauros. It sets up Shadow Sky, and with the Sky boosted Shadow Fire, I get finished off. So let's go ahead and go into the battle once again for an actual first attempt, now that all of our Pokemon are healed. And Skiploom is a one-shot right away with Shadow Fire. Okay, well that is not great. I go for Body Slam, which gets a Lucky Paralysis on Moltres. Go for Twister, hoping to flinch these two. Go for another Body Slam, taking Moltres down to yellow. Shadow Wind hits, dealing almost half to Gyarados. And Shadow Fire takes it down to 31 to go for Body Slam to finish off the Moltres. And then he sends out the Executor once again. Rhydon is able to hit another Shadow End, which doesn't deal that much to Tropius either. And then I go for Body Slam into Executor and Bite, hoping to take it down pretty quickly. And it's actually doing quite a bit of damage. Rhydon hits yet another Shadow End. I send out Sunflora, and I go for Body Slam and Sunny Day. Body Slam is able to take down the Executor, and then out comes Tauros, and because Tauros is going to be slower than me in the sun, I might be able to take it out before it's even able to set up Shadow Sky, which is definitely the biggest threat on this team. Go for Magical Leaf, taking it down to half, and Petal Dance is able to take it down. Okay, well, then he sends out Articuno, which is definitely going to be very hard to take down. Rhydon hits another Shadow End, and at this point, I'm thinking it's not going to be likely that I actually win. And luckily, Sunflora agrees as well, taking down Rhydon, bringing out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Zapdos. I go for Body Slam into Articuno, but that's almost dealing nothing. Another Body Slam doesn't do much better. Petal Dance into Zapdos is doing a bit more damage than I expected, but still not much. While Zapdos is doing a ton of damage to Sunflora, I go for a Body Slam into Articuno once again, and this time get a Paralysis. Sunflora hits itself in confusion. Shadow Bolt finishes off Tropius, and now all that's left is Sunflora, which Zapdos nearly finishes off, and Sunflora does the honor of taking itself out. So now on the 10th attempt, and honestly, things look very dire. However, I do have a solution in mind, and that is getting lucky. Yeah, so unfortunately there's not really a good strategy here. Rhydon just really needs to miss a lot. I'm able to take down Moltres in just a couple turns. There was a strategy I had where I was using Twister at the beginning, that way Rhydon would flinch more often, but unfortunately that didn't make it so Moltres could be taken down in a couple turns, and the longer Moltres is alive, the more dangerous the battle is. So I do just need to get a little bit lucky. I send out Tropius to take down the Rhydon, and then out comes his Tauros, which outspeeds and sets up Shadow Sky, but because Sunflora is so much slower, I'm able to set up Sunny Day right after, which forces the Tauros to want to use Shadow Sky once again. But I can take it down this turn, and I decide to swap into Skiploom because I really need a way to take down Articuno. And Skiploom is probably my best bet. Unfortunately, it does have to land a 75% accurate Sleep Powder, which it does, and now all I need is Sleep Luck. And Tropius speeds up the process by getting a crit, taking it down below half. Skiploom goes down, but that's alright, it's already done its job. I send out Gyarados, that way I can take down the Executor because it's being very annoying, and Body Slam is still doing a decent amount of damage to Articuno. Unfortunately, because the sun is active, Executor is able to outspeed Gyarados. But then he sends out his final Pokemon, Zapdos once again, and luckily Articuno is staying asleep. And at this point, I know Dragon Rage should be able to take down the Articuno, which it does, and then all that's left is Zapdos, which I go for Magic Leaf into, doing more damage than I expected. And I go for another one, and Dragon Rage, and while it does take a bit, I am able to slowly chip it down, and eventually I beat Greevil on the 10th attempt. So with that, how well did Chobin's team do? And I think the best thing I can say is that Chobin was actually able to beat the game at a time of 23 hours, 39 minutes, and 16 seconds, with Sunflora being level 58, Gyarados being level 55, Skiploom being level 50, and Tropius being level 65. With 37 feints throughout the game, 25 of those to bosses, and 12 of those to random trainers. So what really goes wrong here? Well, the thing is that the early game is absolutely brutal. It took me 3 hours just to evolve Sunkern into Sunflora, and there was also the option to just keep it a Sunkern all the way up to Chobin, which I'm really glad I didn't decide to do. Now the mid-game is actually fairly okay because Chobin actually gave his Pokemon some pretty decent moves. Unfortunately, as soon as you get to Cinedark Isle, Chobin takes your two best attackers and makes them incredibly bad, which unfortunately leaves you with a Pokemon that you got halfway through the game that is definitely not going to be as nearly high level as the other two in your party, requiring you to do extra grinding just to get it up to an acceptable level, exacerbating the whole issue of time. And then that just leaves Skiploom, which I think actually did a great job considering what it was given. There's really nothing wrong with Skiploom. It unfortunately just isn't nearly as strong as the other ones, but as a setup Pokemon, fantastic. That unfortunately leaves Chobin's team in the E tier, right above my first ever run with Eevee. Now, the thing is that technically Eevee is a whole hour faster than Chobin, but the thing is that when you're already this bad, time isn't really an issue anymore. It really comes down to, I think, the amount of difficulty you had against fights, and if that's the case, it's definitely not even close because while Chobin did have 10 feints and it took quite a bit of extra grinding to get to that point, but Eevee was 4.5 hours straight of Greevil attempts to get a victory, so it's not even close. So anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2026. Bye.